What's a syndrome? What is a syndrome? Anybody remember? The gray-haired guys all know, because that's what we learned in medical school. The young people don't do that anymore. Everybody's got diseases now. But syndromes are a collection, a constellation, such a pretty word, of signs and symptoms that appear together in a predictable fashion. That's all they are. But the other thing about a syndrome is that it responds to treatment predictably. If I recognize this collection of signs and symptoms and I do something to it, it is going to change. And it's going to change predictably. But what's the difference between a syndrome and a disease? Let me just give you this. The difference between a syndrome and a disease is only this, that a disease has an etiology. I know what causes a disease. That's why SARS is no longer a syndrome. That's why SARS is now a disease. So my next question to you then is, does a syndrome have an etiology? Show of hands. How many say, yes, it does? How many say, no, it doesn't? And how many don't say? All right, for those that said, no, it doesn't, let me ask you this question. Do you think that this collection of signs and symptoms that appear together the same every time, respond to treatment exactly the same every time, is just by random chance? I don't think so. That doesn't make sense. Of course a syndrome has an etiology. The difference is we just don't know what it is. The underlying condition that's triggering this has not yet been identified. Diseases present with collections of signs and symptoms. A child with a high fever and red spots probably has measles. Probably. But that's my first assumption based on a clinical presentation. Here's a little mind game I play with myself. On Thursday morning, I see a back patient. This patient presents with a syndrome, with a pattern that I recognize. I treat this patient according to the pattern, what I've always done. If it's a pattern 1, I do a pattern 1 thing, and the patient does well. Thursday night, I have an epiphany. I suddenly discover in my mind what causes back pain. I have the etiology. I've established, without doubt, the etiology for this pattern of pain. It has now become a disease. It is X disease. Perfect. Friday morning, I see a patient. The same symptoms, the same signs as I saw on Thursday. Only now it's not a syndrome, it's a disease, because I know what's causing it. How do I treat that patient on Friday? Exactly the same as I treated them on Thursday, when I knew it was a syndrome, but I didn't yet know the etiology. So why are we so hung up on I gotta know when you can't know? Now, if you can take that step with me, everything then begins to make sense. That what you're going to do is treat this patient based on what you see, based on what you hear, and the third leg of the stool, as you'll see in a moment, is based on the outcome. If you're a pattern 1 and I treat you like a pattern 1, you will get better like a pattern 1, and if you don't get better, I got a problem, and I go back to the beginning. It really does make a lot of sense, and it's practical, and it's something you can use and do right now. The key is history. I had an interesting conversation. UT is redoing the curricula, and I sat yesterday with a rheumatologist, very tough for an orthopedic surgeon to sit together, because we do, and I thought this is going to be a very tough afternoon. And the first thing she said when she sat on was, I think the history is the most important thing. And I thought, we're home, we're done, because we decided to ask exactly the same questions. She's hearing one thing, I'm hearing another, but we're doing the history. So start with history, and it begins here. It begins with this question: where is your pain the worst? Now that's a question I would think everybody would ask. I was at a meeting in Pittsburgh about a month ago. The surgeon presented a very complex case, which I thought he'd handled terribly. And one of the people in the audience said to him, well, you heard Dr. Hall speak this morning. Where was this patient's pain the worst? And the surgeon said, well, you're really challenging me. Yeah, that's a tough question, Doc. Is that pain worse in the back or worse in the leg? And if you don't know that, you can't treat them.